Okay, guys, so I know y'all been hearing everybody talking about this 7-year peace treaty that Israel's making. And to top it off, here's the United Nations making a 7-year agreement to implement a single global agenda. Let's read more. Is that you, Jesus? Yes, it is. It's time to go. All right, let me stop. Let's keep going. Have you heard about the agreement that global leaders adopted at the United Nations during the 2023 SDG summit that was held earlier last week? Officials from all over the world gathered in New York City to commit their nations to fully implement the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals over the next 7 years. If you are not familiar with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, you can find them right here. These are essentially a blueprint for how the globalists want the world to be run. Just about every area of human activity is covered by the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and it would take extreme measures over the next 7 years in order to achieve all of them by the deadline. But that was what the 2023 SDG Summit was all about. Leaders from all over the planet got together and pledged to do whatever is necessary to meet those goals on time. Y'all gotta understand, they are not taking orders from the one true God. They're taking orders from his direct enemy, who chose to be his direct enemy out of pride. Pride comes before the fall. They are calling it a new phase of accelerated process. They're calling it a new phase of accelerated progress. I'm sorry, guys. I'm so excited that Jesus is coming soon. Literally, I trip over my words and I'm just flying, and I need to stop. Because it's disrespectful to y'all, because I'm sure y'all are probably already reading ahead because I'm getting on your nerves. Let me keep going. The following comes directly from the official UN webpage about this summit. The 2023 SDG Summit took place on the 18th and 19th of September 2023 in New York. It marked the beginning of a new phase of accelerated progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals with high-level political guidance on transformative and accelerated actions leading up to 2030. Convened by the President of the General Assembly, the summit marked the halfway point to the deadline set for achieving the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. It was the centerpiece of the high-level week of the General Assembly. It responded to the impact of multiple and interlocking crises facing the world, and is expected to reignite a sense of hope, optimism, and enthusiasm for the 2030 Agenda. Remember, the Bible says they will say peace and safety, and then destruction will come. The globalists really do intend to implement the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals by the time the UN General Assembly convenes in September 2030. That is just 7 years from now, and so the clock is ticking. During the 2023 SDG Summit, global leaders adopted a sweeping political declaration in which they committed themselves to achieving the 17 Sustainable Development Goals within the next 7 years. Kicking off the second half of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, world leaders at the SDG Summit 2023 today adopted a sweeping political declaration to reaffirm their shared commitment to end poverty and hunger everywhere, combat inequalities within and among countries, and build peaceful societies that leave no one behind. Now listen here. That sounds like that is exactly what we should be doing, but that's not truly what they're going to be doing. The adoption of the 10-page document by the heads of state and government and high representatives gathering at the United Nations headquarters in New York came at a critical juncture as global crises, including armed conflict, adverse climate impacts, and the lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, threaten the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And y'all got to remember, the United States government was caught red-handed sex trafficking kids, and they are one of the biggest sex traffickers of children. What in anyone's right mind would make them think that they would go and actually have good intentions for anybody if they had the audacity to do some horrendous thing like that to children, let alone anyone in general? You have to have eyes to see and ears to hear to know what's going on. Let's continue. The political declaration is 10 pages long, and you can read it for yourself right here. On the 5th page of the document, we are told that there is an urgent need to take the actions necessary to reverse declines and accelerate progress to achieve the 2030 Agenda and implement the SDGs. So what will it look like as we accelerate progress towards those goals? Well, as Paul Joseph Watson has reported, A 20 miles per hour speed limit is being slapped on every single... All right, I'm going to start over at the top of this because I had to do something really quickly. Well, as Paul Joseph Watson has reported, a 20 miles per hour speed limit is being slapped on every single residential road in Wales. How would you feel if every single road in your community had a 20 miles per hour speed limit? Unfortunately, extreme measures such as this will soon be implemented all over the world. The globalists are absolutely determined to meet their climate goals, and all the rest of us will suffer as a result. On the 10th page of the document that the global leaders at the UN just adopted, the Summit of the Future in 2024 is referenced. We look forward to the Summit of the Future in 2024 as an important opportunity to enter alia, accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda and its SDGs. This exceedingly important meeting will be held just 2 months before the next presidential election in the United States. At that gathering, UN member states are scheduled to adopt something called a Pact for the Future. You can read about the Summit of the Future and the Pact for the Future on the official UN website right here, where that link is right there. All right, I can't zoom in, I'm sorry guys. On that page, the UN openly admits that one of the purposes of the Summit of the Future is to put in place a stronger international response playbook for complex global shocks, maximizing the use of the Secretary General's convening power in the form of an emergency platform. I have written about this emergency platform that is being proposed before. Essentially, if there is any sort of a major global shock, the United Nations will be given authority to ensure there is a unified global response to the crisis. So what kind of a global shock would trigger these emergency powers? Well, a UN policy paper that was published some time ago explained that a future pandemic, a major event in outer space, or even unforeseen risks would all qualify. Ultimately, just about any sort of a crisis at all could be used to justify activating this new emergency platform. And once it is activated, officials at the UN would have the power to extend the emergency powers that they have been given indefinitely. Needless to say, this is an extremely frightening proposal. We definitely do not want the UN to have emergency powers over the entire globe that could be extended indefinitely. Sadly, the Biden administration is fully behind this plan. And next September, the U.S. will agree to adopt the Pact for the Future. Of course, this is why they are rushing to get this done. With Biden in the White House, the globalists are able to greatly advance their agenda. But once he leaves, it will be a lot tougher. So time is of the essence. I wish that more Americans understood what the globalists are trying to do. But unfortunately, the mainstream media barely talks about any of this at all. We live in such perilous times, and those that wish to erode our freedoms are absolutely relentless. Officially published at the End of the American Dream, reposted with permission. Look, you guys, the United States government was caught red-handed sex trafficking children. Why do you think they just put that movie out called Sound of Freedom? And why do you think all these movie theaters are not advertising it? Because the government doesn't want people to catch on, because the government knows that most people will just believe anything they're told and go with it to make things easier. But here's the thing. Those who follow Christ, we know that it's not about making things easier. We know that spiritual warfare is hard and life is hard. It's not easy. And we know that God is the only one in control, not us. If at any time anyone is to feel like they are in full control of everything, that's when they have the possibility of falling into a totalitarian mindset, and it could erode their morals without them even seeing it. Because if anybody thinks that Satan is not that cunning, you've got to understand that's insane. Satan is the serpent, and the Bible says the serpent is the most cunning creature of the field. Now, my tone of voice may sound like I'm worried, but I am not. I am very passionate about these things because I met God in person. Going to church never justified just how real this is. It just didn't. That's why you have to have a personal one-on-one relationship with God, or else you're just not going to get it. You got to pursue the truth because God is the truth. Our government is becoming totalitarian. The economy is trashed. It's nothing like it's bad. It's bad right now. People are living paycheck to paycheck. I see all these people suffering daily on these social media platforms, and they're exposing what's really going on. And those who tell the truth, they're labeled as crazy, and those who tell lies, they're labeled as geniuses. We got to wake up. Jesus is coming. Maranatha.